From Microbe TV, this is office hours for Wednesday, the 9th of April, 2025. I'm Vincent Racaniello, and welcome to your corner of the internet, your viral corner, where science rules. And we don't go for lies and misinformation here. We don't tolerate them. So if you have any to bring, just leave them behind. Hello, everyone. Nice to see everybody. Let's see who's moderating today. We have Les. We have Steph SF. We have Vanity Nutrition. And we have Tom Steinberg. Thank you all for coming and moderating. We do need it. We do have bad actors here from time to time. Tell us where you're from. I'll shout you out. Meanwhile, what's on the agenda tonight? Well, I do, for the fourth week in a row, I want to try and show you Dixon's watercolors, some more of them. We have a mini lecture on intrinsic and innate defenses, and of course, your discussion. Science Under Siege continues here in the U.S. and everything else crazy, of course. Well, I'll let Vanity weigh in, and then I will follow up. Yeah, so the first question I am seeing is from Gabriel. So if you put a question up before, he's talking about how can he prepare to have a career in vaccine development. So if you don't see something before, just repost it. Well, John is not going to be here tonight. Sorry to hear that. You can play it later, of course. Wayne is in Urbana, Illinois. Here in the Northeast, at least in New York, New Jersey, it got cold again today. Right now it's 7°C and going down to -1. It's cold outside. I don't want cold anymore. I want warm. Warm. Leo wants to know how Amy is doing. I can't tell you. I can't speak for her. I know exactly how she's doing. But you have to reach out to her yourself because it's confidential, right? So, but yes, she still is at the FDA. Will wants to know. Yes, she's still at the FDA. Kang is in Chicago, where it's 4°C and rainy. Will is in Changsha, 19°C, raising to 29. Well, it's warm there, that's for sure. It's warm there. Oh, it's B from Algeria, or Bay. Welcome back. Jeff is in Elgin, Illinois. Abdul Rahman is in Manhattan. Welcome. Pete is in London. Chris Lepowski's in Montreal. Elizabeth is in West Virginia. Truth or Dare is in La Jolla. Tona is in Long Island. Is on Long Island. Rita is in Southwest Idaho. Joseph, Ontario, Canada. Also Eliza, Ontario, Canada. Jefferson Space is in Miami. Hello, Costello from Ohio. And Doreen, hello from Illinois, Elgin, Illinois. Nice to see you. Maureen is in Ohio. Spamlet is in Beds, UK. Mr. Doreen is in Elgin, Illinois. Logotic is in Chicago, where it's 4°C. Tracy is in Chapel Hill, 11°C. Tractor Poodle in Bangkok, 26°C. 51% chance of rain. 100% chance of stupidity in the White House today, that's for sure. This is what I wanted Vanity to tell you. There was a Borowitz comment that the market crashed because investors we're in bad moods due to omega-3 deficiencies. Well, they went back up today with him saying 90-day pause on the tariff. So they need no stinking omega-3. Gabriel is in Bristol, England. Lise can't stay from Columbus. Okay, no problem. Farhad wants to know if tariffs can affect lab research. Of course. Yeah, we get a lot of stuff from overseas. I don't know exactly what, but everything is impacted. MN is in the D.C. area where it's chilly. Mark Martin is in Tacoma, Washington. Sunny, 13.5 degrees. Going to record a podcast and release one. Tomorrow is Thursday. Remember, Mark, let them talk. Don't interrupt. Good podcast practice. Let your hosts talk. Don't interrupt them, no matter how excited you are. Betty K is from Washington Heights, 42F, with a good chance of measles. That's right. Mike and Laurie are from Seattle, 58F. Slightly cloudy with no rain. If you are just arriving, please hit the like button. We have a disparity between likes and concurrent viewers. So it's free. Just hit it. And it helps other people know that we're doing something interesting. No Mark Martin, not ouch. It's the truth. You need to let your hosts speak. You interrupt them too much. That's the golden rule of podcasting. The best podcasters let their hosts talk and don't interrupt them, because it's not about you, Mark. It's about your guests. Don't forget that. As, scintillating as you may be, now, if you want to do something on your own, you could do that. But when you have a guest, focus on them. Thank you very much. Yeah, Pete says, Mark Martin, your podcasts have grown from the early 20 minutes to 45 to 60 minutes. What happened? Well, I told Mark to shorten them. That's what happened. And when you get advice, they always go the opposite way. Hey, MJ is in Austin, where it's 27C. Julie S., Pennsylvania, 7C. Yeah, it's very easy to get excited and interrupt. There's where you separate the amateurs from the professional podcasters. Yeah, you can get excited, but you also need to know how to control yourself. It's a better podcast than you interrupting your guests. I hate it when people interrupt their guests. It's horrible. It means their guests don't mean anything to them. Hat is from San Fernando Valley, where it's 86. Oh my gosh. I think you keep saying host when you mean guest. Whatever, you know what I'm talking about. Don't interrupt your guest, Mr. Host. Dorothy Charging Hawk, 2C. Good to see you back. Nevitz. New York City 41F from soon to be defunded NOAA. Yeah, this is a shame. For no good reason whatsoever. To fund a wonderful administration. Not administration. Yeah, administration. That does important things for no reason at all, except just to be a jerk. Rita Ramon says, I'm following a political podcast, which could be much improved if they refuse to do AM morning DJ type patter. Yeah, everyone think that's cool. It's not. Berthy's in Duluth, Minnesota. I'm not saying Mark doesn't have to be enthusiastic. You guys are now turning it back on me. Knock it off. He needs to stop interrupting his guests. Tractor says 17 minutes is the perfect length for a podcast, except for TWIV, which should always be at least 2 hours. Yes. 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 And when we have guests, we don't interrupt them. Even if we have 3 people, 3 hosts and a guest, we're really good about not interrupting them. Patricia's in D.C. We need less cracking down on free speech at universities. Well, the universities need to figure out a way to fight back. Because as you saw at Columbia, the former president, Armstrong, she was going to give all in, and she got fired. No, she didn't take a sabbatical. She got fired. They told her to step down, I'm sure, because they didn't like that she was giving away everything. Fight, folks! Ridiculous. Ay, ay, ay. Martha's in Charleston, South Carolina, 59F. Do professional podcasters chastise their co-podcasters in a public forum? Well, I do. Why not? Maybe it'll make him better, because I've told him before he hasn't listened. Nevis. David Letterman was the master at gestus interruptus. Is that right? I'm not impressed. Not impressed. Tona says, I nailed the art, Vincent, of talk show hosts. You let them talk. If I have a guest, the point is to let them talk. Ask a question and step back. And yeah, they can go on for a while. You can remember what they say, or you can make a note if you want to ask them something and ask it later. It's not that hard. You can still be really enthusiastic. Martha says, please help me find the measles vaccine chart in the show notes. Well, I can just send you the link, but it's in there. Let's see. Microbe TV. Where are we going to? TWIV. Okay, JPEG. Copy link, address, and one will hope. Yeah, let's put it right in the chat directly. This is the direct link to the JPEG. All right, but it's in the show notes every week. There you go. Vanity had blood drawn for measles titer today. I guess, yeah, you're in contact with a lot of people. You need to know whether you should be vaccinated or not. Yep. El Cabong is in Richmond, Virginia, where it's 51F. Okay, let's go back to some questions. All right, Gabriel says, I am doing a PhD in microbiology and immunology. I want to work on vaccine development. How can I move towards that? So there are a couple of approaches you can take. You're going to do a PhD and then you're going to do a postdoc, right? So you could, vaccines, it could be viral or bacterial, and they're different. Similar principles, but, underlying are different as well. So you could do a PhD in some aspect of virology that's relevant to vaccines. And then as a postdoc, there are labs that work on vaccines, academic labs. Gee, who knew? More and more institutes have sprung up across the country for vaccine development. There was a Center for the Vaccine Research Center at NIH, unfortunately being shuttered, but that would have been a great place to go for a postdoc. But anyway, find a lab who's doing vaccine research, fundamental basic vaccine research, and do a postdoc in them. But first, get well grounded. If you want to do virus vaccines, virology, microbiology, if you want to do microbial vaccines, that's my advice to you. Les says, the junior finally buried in a tweet. The most effective way to prevent the spread of measles is the MMR vaccine, which is a truth. Someone must have told him to say this, okay? And I'd love to know who. If he had said it weeks ago, he might have averted a death. He should have rustled up some immunizers and gone down there and did a PR program and explained why this is important to get vaccinated. And yeah, you won't get everyone, but you're going to get some people. You got to have at least making an effort. Not telling them to take vitamin A and cod liver oil. And there was another comment about Junior. Yes, he attended the funeral of 8-year-old Daisy Hildebrand, unvaccinated and dead, and apparently her father still is an anti-vaxxer. And vaccination is not a personal decision. And in a country like the U.S., you can't have people doing what they want. Public health requires you to follow the rules. And I'm sorry if you don't like it. Too bad. Suck it up. I've gotten every vaccine I needed. What's the problem? There are none. You get protected against disease. All right, so that was the RFK. Now, here, Will writes, as a Mennonite, I'm getting pushback for complaining about old colony anti-vaxxers. Now, can you explain why some Mennonites are anti-vaccine? Like, what's the problem with getting vaccinated? Do you know? And how could you not vaccinate a kid, lose the kid, and still say you're anti-vaccine? This doesn't make any sense. Parents are supposed to protect their kids. And he didn't. Shouldn't be a parent if you're not going to do what you're supposed to do. Oh, yeah, I know. People do much worse. That's what I'm thinking. Here's another one. I believe Senator Bill Cassidy was about to ask Junior to explain what he was doing about the outbreak. Well, he could have brought him into Congress and grilled him. That would have been great. Oh, yeah, I told him to take vitamin A. And how did that come out? How did that work out, sir? There were some cases of liver disease. He would never say that. But this tweet is not good enough. He still needs to bring him to Congress and question him. And Cassidy needs to do it because his vote was crucial in approving this guy. An MD. Who knows better? Here, Les says, amazingly, her father is still anti-vaccine. Kang asked Google and Microsoft AI how to prevent measles outbreaks, and both recommended vaccination and strongly advised against using vitamin A as a preventative. Yeah, well, they could have said that there's zero evidence in well-nourished countries that vitamin A has any effect on measles disease, because that is in fact what's been found. But at least they're not saying it's a personal choice. Computers are smarter than we are. Well, I know they get their information from us. Yeah. I got it. Hat, interesting impressions of the Nature article pointing to the fire-footed rope squirrel. I didn't see that. Let's look it up. I might do it Friday on Twiv, right? Fire-footed rope squirrel. Oh, that's very interesting. An animal source of Mpox emerges, and it's a squirrel. Long-term surveillance of wildlife in Africa. Has this been published? Preprint ahead of peer review. All right, so, we'll have to wait till the paper's reviewed. And then we will certainly do it on Twiv. That's a great Twiv paper. Thank you, Hat, for bringing it to my attention. Lovely. scrolling through because I took a lot of these and scrolling through for some questions. Richard Lynch from Northern California. So glad I found Microbe TV. Okay, Martha, you're welcome. I guess you got it. Okay, good. It's a very nice chart, a decision chart for vaccination. Check it out. Measles chart doesn't say if you had measles. Sure it does. Sure it does. It says, born prior to 57. Highly likely you had measles as a child. You're immune. How much clearer could it be? After 57, we were not sure because we started vaccinating in the early 60s. So we're not sure. And so we're not assuming that you were immune, all right? Pete says he sponsors Dave Borlas. Just Have a Think podcast on energy climate solutions. Drops 6 p.m. every Sunday, 13 to 14 minutes every time. I do admire pods that stay. I mean, we're pretty good about controlling length. I mean, I can look at the clock and decide whether to do emails or not because I have an idea of how long picks take, But we've been stopping less than 2 hours lately. Yeah. Yep. I'm joining a lab working on HTLV1. I know that vaccine development is improving. It's good. That's a good choice to work on. It's good. Yeah, nobody interrupted Dixon. Dixon wasn't a guest. He was a host. All bets are off for hosts. However, the lab is not equipped for vaccine work. Well, you can get your fundamentals in. Get your fundamentals of viruses in, and then for a postdoc, you can learn about vaccines. Hello, Hans from Ecuador, 30C. Has any been discussion of rubella? No, there hasn't been. And in fact, last week, someone asked for a mumps mini lecture. I would do a rubella mini lecture as well. Yeah, for sure. Can he, RFK or HHS, be sued? I don't know. It seems like everybody can be sued, right? El Cabong says, by the way, my cousin, Dr. Niels Lonberg, is the one that turned me on to TWIV. High praise. Very good. Thank you, Dr. Lonberg, and thank you, El. Hello, Lori in Charlottesville, Virginia. So, Patricia, probably in response to my Mennonite question, I think it's just being in a somewhat insular community and whispers of the supposed drawbacks of vaccination just get passed around and believed. I think it may be the insularity. Well, I would like Will from Changsha to answer. He may not. That's fine. Elizabeth is more upset by the parents saying measles wasn't a problem for their children after one of them died. How cold is that? It's extremely cold. There are many cold people in this country, in this world, as you know. Okay, backwards. Can't say it. Lean Ichir. Jr. is tiptoeing to stay between the lines in his effort towards a nomination to run for president. Oh my God. I can't imagine this guy ever being elected. But who knows? He got confirmed for the HHS head by the Senate. Who knows what can happen? Kang says, with funding cuts, how soon will we see the reduction of papers from U.S. researchers? Within a year, I think. You know, we pick a lot of papers from the U.S. Not all, but a lot. And we'll see. I'll tell you when we start to see a decline. But right now, there's a lot in the pipeline. But many labs, the work was just cut off immediately with no warning, and so that has had to stop. But yeah, I think if the cuts continue, that you'll see a reduction in publication by U.S. researchers. Yep. Mike says they also used to cast virgins into volcanoes. Religion is not a good reason to kill your children. It certainly is not. There's no reason to, right? You're supposed to take care of them. Costello. This measles thing is insane. All day long, I see people saying they had it way back and it was nothing and no one was harmed or died. Like, this is BS. Many, many kids died of measles before the vaccine. It's not hard to find those statistics. They're just lying, Costello. And this is the frustrating part, to justify a very severe disease. Justify not vaccinating against it. People really getting blood clots from corona vaccine, or is that fake news? Very, very rare. Very rare. I asked Daniel this a couple of weeks ago. Is there isolated incidents? But to say it's happening all the time is fake news. Yeah. Okay, Will says, what I know of the old order anti-vaxxers is much like all anti-vaxxers, misinformation. There's no official anti-vax position. Some, like some evangelicals, trust in God for their health. Hypocrisy. Okay, it's good to know. I thought they had some things saying they couldn't put stuff in their body. I know someone who's an evangelical. And, he and his family were not vaccinated against COVID. I said, why? He said, my religion doesn't allow me to put foreign things in my body. I'm like, what the heck? Are you kidding? What do you think food is? My God. Tryon wants to know if copper-zinc balances affect virus infection. I have no idea. No idea. I cringe, Vanity says, when I see do your own research. How can that compare to medical education? Maybe vax don't come without some risk, but that's all they look at. They don't compare it to what the diagnosis will do. But the risk is far, far lower, whatever risk you're talking about. The myocarditis for COVID vaccines, far, far lower than for COVID itself. There's no comparison. And there's no reason to say it's a vaccine that's killing people. It's not. It's absolutely not. Patricia says you're still getting syphilis cases in D.C. Yes. You can thank PrEP for that. Pre-exposure prophylaxis for HIV. Now people think they don't have to wear condoms. But hey, you know what? There are other sexually transmitted diseases. Oh my gosh. Mike wants to know how much coffee I had. I have 1 cup every morning in the morning and only 1 cup. But certain things I'm passionate about. If I weren't, I wouldn't be doing this. Okay? So you'll have to deal with what you may perceive as an overreaction. It's just me. It comes with a lot of good, I think. Eliza said, so today in my city, the school board started suspending students in grade 11, not up to date on vaccines. Reporters interviewed teens outside a school near me and all said vaccines should be required. Well, that's great. You shouldn't suspend them. They should tell them to go get vaccines. Suspension is kind of a harsh thing. At least it's temporary. Hello, Zhu. 82 in Austin. Should we praise RFK for saying measles is the most effective way to prevent measles outbreaks? No, because he was, first of all, it was buried in a tweet. And he said it under duress, no doubt. Someone made him say that. Someone higher up said, "Hey, Junior, you're messing things up. Fix it." He has no conviction behind it. No conviction. Did he follow it up with a mass vaccination campaign in Texas? No. That would be the thing to do. For example, 2 years ago, there was a case of polio in upstate New York in the summer. CDC mobilized vaccine units and sent them there to vaccinate people. Now, unfortunately, there wasn't much uptake, but they did it. That's the right thing to do. And you don't see Junior doing it because he really doesn't believe in it. So basically, he's lying. Patricia's in Massachusetts. Hello, Patricia. Pete says, apart from closing the curtains when I had measles, our parents were hardly likely to scare a 6 or 7-year-old about the rarest risks, so generational memory is forgotten. Yes, it's true. But this is not a mild disease, Pete. You know that. One in 1,000, when you have outbreaks of tens of thousands of kids, 1 in 1,000 encephalitis is not mild. Pneumonia, deafness. How about SSPE after 10 years? Uniformly fatal neurological disease. So anyone who says it's mild is just wrong. Or as you say, maybe they forgot. And so you should start incorporating mushrooms in your diet. You can eat them with pasta. I do eat mushrooms periodically. Will wants to know what's my perspective of Dr. Oz. So you mean him as the being in charge? Oh, totally inappropriate, unqualified entirely. Dr. Oz is a snake oil salesman. You know, he pushed alternative remedies most of his career. And this is not someone you want in charge of Medicare, Medicaid. No, I made a video a while ago explaining why I didn't like him. Let me see if I can find it. It's in the other computer. You can find it on YouTube. I wonder if I played a video here. You don't need to have the sound actually. Let's see if I can find it. It's very short and it will give you my thoughts. Here, let's go to YouTube. My YouTube channel. It's loading. It's loading. Let's see. YouTube Prof VRR. What are we going to say here? Macari, right? Marty Macari. What is this? Why doesn't it show up? Damn. Well, we're talking about Oz, not Macari. Sorry. Let's try Oz. I think it was a short. Nope, not showing up. Let's go through the shorts. You know, we have a lot of shorts. Sorry about the sniffles, folks. Dr. Oz. Did I make a video on Dr. Oz? Maybe I never did. Yeah. Here he is. Here. I'm going to share my screen. And you can read the words because I don't think you can hear them. Okay, so basically I said he peddles alternative medicines. Early in COVID, he pushed hydroxychloroquine. In fact, he bought thousands of doses because he wanted to profit from it. So this guy is a fraud. I'm sorry. He shouldn't be heading Medicaid and Medicare. Ay, ay, ay. Elizabeth says, I'd be surprised if lawsuits now that he's in the HHS would be successful because of the Supreme Court immunity decisions. Well, don't they just affect the president and not him? I don't know. He should just be fired. Hello, Wendy from New Walland in Australasia. Are we seeing any significant viral outbreaks we should be watching? Well, H5N1 in birds and other mammals. But down in Australia, you don't have H5N1. So probably not paying attention to it. But that's a big one. Huge. People are watching it. New Zealand. Damaged autocorrect. Thank you, New Zealand. Will Old Colony Menos being a closed community promotes misinformation? Well, it sure does. As I said, I was just curious if there was any official proclamation. But according to Paul Offit, no religion has in its codices that you can't get vaccinated. Yep. RFK Jr. would make the disaster of healthcare that DJT did of the economy. Still working on it, isn't he? Tryon says, do cells use more zinc to replicate viruses? That's a good question. I don't know. Some viruses require zinc as a cofactor, but I don't know if, cells can't make zinc. So you could only have what's in the cell or maybe procure it somehow from outside of the cell. Talking about lawsuits and RFK might hurt his reputation. Anything that shows him up as the idiot he is a good thing. Yeah. Yes, Amish don't vaccinate their kids either. That's correct. Before 2022, the last polio case in the U.S. was in an Amish community in 1979 because they don't vaccinate. I don't know what you can do about that, right? Because they homeschool and so they get out of the vaccination requirement. But as you see, the outbreak in Texas in a homeschooled community spreads to others. It's not really fair. They say, oh, we live our own lives by ourselves. And sorry, go live somewhere else because it's not working out that you spread infectious diseases to other people. There's only one religion that prohibits Christian Science. One. Yep, that's what Paul Offit has said. Hat says, worldwide measles caused an estimated 107,000 deaths in 2023. That's right. It's a lot of deaths. Gee, a lot of deaths for a mild disease, isn't it? Idiots. Nevis says air, oxygen, and nitrogen are foreign. Well, I guess so. And environmental says, however, if my Amish neighbors have children that get sick, they get the treatment. Right. Yes, anti-vaxxers go to the hospital if they break a leg. Of course. DX is disease. Thank you. Implosive said, I had side effects from my booster. Diagnosis pericarditis, but it passed quickly. Myocarditis and pericarditis are two of the known rare side effects, yeah. Visto says there's nothing in the Bible forbidding vaccines. The Pope himself told people to vaccinate. Of course, religions are all about taking care of their constituency, right? Making sure they're healthy. That includes vaccination. So it would be silly for any religion to say you can't vaccinate. Just silly. Tuj says tariffs will have an effect on Ozempic. There you go. Yeah, I always thought DX was diagnosis too. That's why I said diagnosis. But, okay. Jeff writes that evangelical allows viruses to enter his body. Shouldn't he wear a mask? Or is he against having to wear a mask too? I don't know about the mask, but you're right. Yeah, he's breathing bacteria and viruses every day. It's ridiculous. Unfortunately, I pass a big evangelical church, huge, on the way to the train station every day. And all I can see when I see it, a lot of people, hundreds and hundreds of people go there to listen to the, whatever you call the head, spew misinformation, most likely. I always think, why are they doing that? Okay, thank you, Zhu, for overreact. Well, I mean, I don't think it's an overreaction. I'm just reacting. It's the way I react. Thank you, though. Privyet Veronika. Welcome back. Oh, yes, measles also kills memory B and T cells. Don't forget that. Loss of immune memory. Veronika is in Moscow where it's minus 4C and lots of snow. Oh my gosh, lots of snow. Environmental. Every single aspect of every single agency, law, rule, and safety net in the U.S. will be eroded quite soon. It's very sad. I'm hoping you're wrong. I'm hoping we can fight back, okay? I'm hoping you're wrong. Patricia says, I guess RFK is getting a good look at a bunch of documents that will help him when he goes back to working on behalf of the anti-vaxxers, whatever that group is. Well, he says he cut ties with the Children's Health Initiative or whatever it's called. They're basically an anti-vax organization. And he works with a law firm that sues vaccine manufacturers. He's still doing that, even though it's a complete conflict of interest. That's right. Children are getting liver damage from vitamin A overdose. One cup. I have one pot to wake up. Your BP is pretty low. Good for you. I used to drink coffee during the day, and it upset my stomach. And I stopped. I got one a day, and that was fine. That's all I need. Environmental says the EPA is being gutted 65%. No more environmental justice department, which means they'll build where poor and rural people live without care. Just to be mean. That's it. It's just to be mean. Oh, we don't need government. Well, yeah, we do. Because without government, people go crazy and do stupid things. So now a good fraction of the U.S. wants to go back to that. You talk about forgetting about infectious diseases. They forget about the pre-FDR era. Oh, my gosh. Penicillins cause about 500 to 1,000 deaths per year due to anaphylaxis. We still use them as they save magnitude more lives. That's very interesting. Well, vaccines don't do that. Yeah, I don't get this. Politicians trying to loosen the regulations. They're going to get contaminated as well. Don't they get it? Ay. Yeah, why don't they remember? They keep saying on social media, they had it 1,000 years ago as nothing and nobody was harmed. It's not true that nobody was harmed. You don't know of the kids who died and had pneumonia and went deaf and got SSPE. You don't know because you didn't look up the statistics. So it's wrong for you to say that. Costello says, I just keep blocking people because I can't deal. I figure by the end I will have blocked 3/4 of everyone. Visto, chickenpox live attenuated vaccine for kids. Does it go latent? Yes. It's a little scary that the vaccine goes latent. So maybe shingles later. I don't think we've seen that. So apparently some people get shingles even after getting so Zostavax is the live attenuated vaccine. And so I think this is a bit creepy that it goes latent. So they're trialing Shingrix as a chickenpox vaccine for kids. I think that would be much better because it's a protein-based vaccine, right? There's no way that it can go latent. Kang wants to know how many chronic diseases are caused by infections. Well, all the herpes viruses infect you for life, so they're all chronic, right? Herpes simplex, Epstein-Barr cytomegalovirus, CMV, HHV6/7. So those are all chronic right there. Hepatitis B virus and hepatitis C virus, HIV/AIDS, HTLV1. Those are the ones I can think of off the top of my head. And more that we don't know about, so it's substantial. Yes, it was good that Mercola wasn't given a position. This is another, as Paul Offer would say, virulent anti-vaxxer who sells alternative products. During COVID, he pushed hydrogen peroxide and quercetin to prevent COVID disease. Totally ridiculous. Unproven that it does anything. Oh my gosh. Pete says, I've watched all the measles lectures. I'm not minimizing it. Yeah, I understand. You want to understand the loss of generational memory. But as you saw, people who I had measles, right? For me, it was no big deal. But I didn't know what was happening in the world. So how can anyone else know unless they look up the statistics? And if they did, they wouldn't say that it's a mild disease. So it's just errors of omission. They don't know. Kevin says Novavax won't receive FDA approval because it's single antigen as per RFA. Where'd you get that from? I didn't hear that. That's not what I heard. Single antigen. The mRNA vaccines are single antigens too. That doesn't make any sense. Tom said he knows people born before 57 who had deafness or other neurological issues, likely as sequelae of measles. Yeah, many people, more than we know probably, right? Always. In the 50s, 60s, more children died from measles than polio. This is after the polio vaccine was introduced, but before measles vaccine. And many of those deaths were from bacterial infections, right? Because measles immunosuppresses you and you get bacterial infections. Will says, I'm new to Dr. Oz, but I concluded the same as Vincent. BMJ wrote a paper in 2012 highlighting his misinformation. It's horrible. Just all the worst people are having these positions. It's crazy. Angry Penguins halfway through booster shots prompted me to contact a former colleague who was head of measles vaccine production, where I worked to get the inside scoop on how the vaccine was made. Cool. Talk more about original antigenic sin. Well, It's pretty simple. For flu, you get infected the first time you see a flu virus. Let's say it's 2009 H1N1. Then the next time you see anything related to that, you're going to make a memory response to that H1N1 virus. So that's original antigenic. So it's really memory. It's immune memory or imprinting. And the influenza virus has to be substantially different, and then you will get a primary response against that new. So if you got infected with H3N2 virus, that's really different from H1N1. So you'll make a primary response against H3N2. Okay, same with COVID. The first one you see imprints upon you, and then anything related to that that you encounter, you make an immune response against that. And this was a problem with some of the early boosters that were really similar to. So we had the original SARS-CoV-2, and we made a vaccine against that, gave it to a lot of people. And then the virus drifted a bit, and we thought that was important. So we made a booster to the drifted virus, but most people made a response to the original one that they had seen because it was very close. So it can foil you, right? Yes, also Dr. Oz wants to privatize Medicare. That's correct. It is really a joke. And environmental, what I find amazing is that so many people defend it. Like you have these top financial people saying, this is madness. You don't know what you're doing. And they still say, oh, yeah, we're going to stick with it. It's a brilliant plan. I never saw such overt lying and misguidance. I really never did. They're just trying to see how far they can push it, basically. And unfortunately, they have a compliant Supreme Court, which really sucks because they're not doing us any favors. I mean, can you believe they deport this guy and they say they can't get him back? The judge had said don't send them, and they sent them anyway. Now they say we can't get him back. This is just disgusting behavior. Disgusting. But that's not virology, so let's not get there. Thank you, John, for your contribution to science communication. We do need it. Thanks for stopping by, John. Really appreciate it. Costello says, I'm so tired every day. I understand that. I get frustrated every day. But you got to just push on. There's nothing else to do. Yeah, I think we have to start a movement to get rid of RFK Jr. I don't know if it will happen, but he really needs to go. He's hurting people. April wants to know any good virology. Going to go to Abercam's. Well, you know, the best virology conference, in my opinion, is ASV, which is in July. It's too bad you can't go to that. I think that's really a really fabulous conference. Dr. Oz also said in 2020 that 2% fatality from COVID-19 is a small number. Yeah, you know, on a scale from 0 to 100, it's small, but it's huge in terms of infectious diseases. He doesn't get it. He's a surgeon. What do you expect? Surgeons. I mean, listen, my dad was a surgeon, okay? I knew his limitations. Dr. Oz doesn't know about infectious diseases. He doesn't. He cuts you. Here from Rita. In a recent Dr. Oz commercial on YouTube, he was selling a natural remedy for diabetes, suggesting diabetics can stop taking drugs and insulin. Completely untested natural remedy, right? How can you do this as a physician? How can you do this? And many physicians are doing this. Mercola and others. Oh my gosh. Hello, Keith from Belterre, Quebec. Nice to have you. Yeah, Dr. Oz is bad. Really bad. Yep. Okay, I answered Kevin's question about the delay in Novavax. Well, there was a one way back. I didn't understand. He said it's a single antigen. This doesn't make any sense to me because the mRNA vaccines are one antigen, the spike protein. And Novavax is the spike protein, the whole spike protein. So it doesn't make sense to me. Okay, now we have some clarifications. DX is diagnosis, DZ is disease, and then we have TX is treatment, RX medication, and there's all kinds of other abbreviations too, right? But I don't remember them because I don't use them. Andrew wants to know, is there work being done on mitigating autoimmune disorders by imitating how some viruses mess with memory B cells? Yeah. We give people antibodies that kill B cells, right? Antibodies to a B cell antigen called CD20, like rituximab, right? Is that one of them? Let's see. Yeah, CD20. It targets B cells. So we're already doing that because we don't want to kill all memory cells, right? So people with a variety of disorders mediated by B cells, you give them monoclonal antibodies that will eliminate the B cells, right? Yes, we're doing that. Yeah, apparently 500 people a year die from penicillin allergies. Yep. I just looked it up. 500 deaths per year. I don't know. Yeah, that's the U.S. Mm-hmm. That's the U.S. It's very sad. Visto said the best president of the U.S. died from measles in the 50s. Who's that? What U.S. president died of measles? No U.S. president has died of measles. That's what it says, Visto. Sorry. Patricia says our family had a best of life photo book that featured a poor child with encephalitis from measles. That photo is imprinted on my brain. You see, that's what people need to see who think it's mild, right? Rip the comp, hello from Boulder, Colorado. Vincent needs a t-shirt that says I had measles was a big deal. Tractor says we still vaccinate in Southeast Asia. Something about often seeing firsthand the consequences of infectious diseases. Well, the majority of Americans vaccinate too. It's just that you don't need many people not to vaccinate to get outbreaks, as we can see with the measles issue. Molly wants to know does it make a difference what booster you get? With what virus you're talking about? SARS-CoV-2? Well, right now, one hasn't been specified. And anyway, there's only one available every year. Do I think one day we'll have a vaccine against the common cold? Yeah, probably. It's going to be hard, you know. There's a lot of different types that you have to vaccinate against, but perhaps eventually, yeah. I think it's doable. Yeah. Dagfinn from Norway, 2:53 a.m. Brave fella, 3 degrees Celsius. Oh, this is good. This is a good point. John says, well, people entering the U.S. military service must be vaccinated with all of the vaccines that they may have received as a child. This is proof that the vaccines are safe. Use that example. That's very good. I didn't know that. Someone should ask RFK. He'll say, they're all being brainwashed. Spamlet writes, when I was at school, there were kids with calipers from polio and with stumpy arms from thalidomide. Kids made their lives hell with spastic jokes. Yeah, it's true. Totally true. Polka dot pup, I'm glad you have an opinion and say what you think. I always do that. And it's important for science to do that, right? Yeah, that's the point, Les. 2% is a lot of deaths. How can a doctor minimize deaths? It's so insensitive and so against the Hippocratic Oath. I guess he forgot that he took it. Did Mercola have his license revoked? Let's see. I don't know. I can't find it quickly. So I don't know. Maybe someone else knows. Could the AMA pull Oz's license? Yeah, they probably won't. Vincent, did you grow up in the city during the time of polio? So I was born in 53 in Paterson, New Jersey, which is a substantial city. And I got the first polio vaccine in 55. But I don't remember them doing it. I was kind of young, right, to remember. But I got the vaccine right away. So I was very lucky that, 2 years old and I didn't get infected. There were no major outbreaks. So I dodged a bullet. Vaccines work. They really do. I don't understand why people have to trash them. I really pick on something else, okay? Pete says a Dutch great uncle was interned during World War II by the Japanese in the Dutch East Indies, Indonesia. Starvation fixes diabetes while there. Yeah, that'll do it. Yep. Ars Technica reports that doctors are speaking out against RFK. Yeah, but many have to speak out. Not just Daniel Griffin and a few others. Many have to speak out publicly. I'm very happy to see that Michael Osterholm spoke out and criticized what RFK is doing. Crestella, at least you have a penicillin allergy. When you go in, they say, are you allergic to penicillin? Yes, and they won't give it to you. So there's no chance you're going to get anaphylaxis. Mehmet was stripped of his medical degree by the UPenn. He doesn't get to be called Dr. Oz. Yeah, but he still does surgery. How can that be? Still does surgery. Heart surgery at Columbia. I wouldn't let him touch me. Doreen, thank you for your support of science communication. Really appreciate it. Who started saying ay, ay, ay first? I never said ay, ay, ay. It was Amy, yeah, for sure. Was the death rate from COVID in the U.S. one of the highest? Yeah, it was. 30% of the people wouldn't get vaccinated. Okay, folks, you want a mini lecture? I'm going to give you one. I'm not going to ask you. Last question for now. Since measles can wipe out immunity for other pathogens, can it also wipe out immunity to itself? Well, if it's the first time you're getting infected, right, you haven't established memory to measles yet. And so the timing, so let's see. We got virus circulating, and yeah, you could make memory to measles. I think the timing, it depends on the timing. But so you don't have it yet to destroy. That's the point. March 716, Central Virginia. How's that possum? Okay, I'm going to do a little mini lecture, and then I'll be back with questions. Hope you like it. I know you can go on talking. That's what the students do in class. At least the medical students do. My class, they can't talk, although some of them do. Okay, this is about intrinsic and innate defenses. This is a watered-down version of one of my lectures. So here's how I look at host defenses, a series of walls. First, you have this wall, anatomical and chemical barriers. They're always present, like mucus, saliva, stomach acid, tears, skin, scabs, defensins. Defensins are proteins produced on your skin by bacteria that are antimicrobial. So those are the first line of defense. Your skin is a great line of defense. The outer layer is dead and viruses can't reproduce in it. Some viruses will get through that, and then they encounter intrinsic immunity, which is also there all the time. And that consists of interferons, autophagy, apoptosis, microRNAs, and CRISPR. That stops a lot of infections, but some viruses get through. And then you have innate immunity. Natural killer cells complement antigen-presenting cells, neutrophils, cytokines, including more interferons. I think this takes care of most viral infections, but if you get through, and by then you're feeling not so good, and that's where adaptive immunity comes in, or acquired, the T cells and the B cells. So today we're just going to focus on intrinsic and innate immunity, these two middle walls. So intrinsic immunity is ready to go, always present in the uninfected cell. It includes programmed cell death, which is apoptosis, autophagy, cells eating themselves. So in both cases, to prevent viruses from reproducing, RNA silencing, and a variety of antiviral proteins. On the other hand, the innate immune system, you need some warming up. It's induced by infection. And then the adaptive immune system is tailored to the pathogen. So everything so far is not tailored to the pathogen. But by the time you get to antibodies and B cells, they are pathogen specific. But we will talk about them today, maybe another time. Here's an example of intrinsic defenses. It's called epigenetic silencing. Now, DNA in our cells, in the nuclei, is very compacted. The DNA in this picture is blue. And you can see it's wrapped around these hamburgers. Well, they're not hamburgers. They're little discs of proteins called nucleosomes, made of histone proteins. And the reason they're wrapped around this is to compact it so it fits in the nucleus, but also when DNA is compact, it cannot be transcribed. It cannot be copied into mRNA. So you don't make any gene expression. You don't make any proteins. It's a good way to regulate gene expression. On the other hand, open chromatin, the transcription can occur. So the transition between open and closed can regulate gene expression. Gene expression, I mean the synthesis of mRNA from DNA, and mRNA can then go on to make protein. And chemical modification of the histones can convert it to an open or closed configuration. Now, when viral DNA enters the nucleus, it's immediately wrapped around chromatin. It's kind of a intrinsic defense to shut it down. It's tightly wrapped, and it's put into these bodies called PML bodies. These are nuclei stained blue, and all these green dots are viral DNAs that have been chromatinized, compacted into chromatin to shut off their transcription. But you know what's interesting? Viruses counter that, otherwise they wouldn't exist. They make proteins that inhibit acetylation. So taking off this acetyl group will make the DNA compact. And so cytomegalovirus has a protein that inhibits the removal of acetyl groups to keep it open and transcribable. And Epstein-Barr virus can affect the localization of these DNAs in the nucleus. And of course, retroviral DNA integrates into the nucleus. And so that keeps it open. So that's an example of intrinsic defenses. Right? Another one is apoptosis, programmed cell death. So when a cell is infected by a virus, the cell can sense it, and it begins to die. Apoptosis is programmed cell death. And eventually that cell dies, and the idea is that it will prevent the virus from reproducing. Now, also, apoptosis results in pieces of the cell breaking off. They're called apoptotic bodies. And those are usually taken up by sentinel cells, which are cells of the innate immune system, including macrophages, dendritic cells, and NK cells. They will take up these apoptotic bodies and present them to T cells in the lymph node to see if there's any foreign protein there. Okay, so that's a way of knowing if an infection is going on. But here's a real picture of cells undergoing apoptosis. You can see these blebs that will eventually break off and become apoptotic bodies. So that's another form of intrinsic defense. Okay, that's it for intrinsic. I want to spend the rest of the time talking about innate defenses because you hear this all the time. Interferons, right? Interferons can be bad for you, but they're also really good. All right, innate defenses are activated within minutes to hours after infection, so pretty fast, but not as fast as intrinsic. And it consists of cytokines, sentinel cells, and complement. And the sentinel cells are, as I just told you before, dendritic cells, macrophages, and NK cells. And the cool thing about the innate system is when virus replication gets out of hand, it can tell the adaptive system, it can communicate with it and say, I can't handle this. You need to help me. And then the adaptive or the acquired immunity kicks in. You know, we could talk about that next time. That's pretty cool too. Okay, so the whole idea is this innate system recognizes foreign things but not yourself. So how does that happen? Well, for many years people didn't know. They hypothesized that somehow we had to distinguish foreign from self, but they didn't know how. And the key discovery was in 1980. There were two German scientists. They were studying fruit flies, and they were trying to find genes that were involved in development. And the legend goes that one particular mutant fly, it looked really weird. And so when they looked at it under the microscope, them being German said, "Das war ja toll." I can't speak German, but crazy or far out. And so they called it the toll gene. And that's why we call them toll-like receptors to this day. And so that gene originally had a role in development of the fly, and then they found it had a role in immunity, and then they were identified in mammals. And now we realize that toll-like receptors, as well as other proteins, play a huge role in sensing foreign from self. Okay? And these are called pattern recognition receptors. So we have toll-like receptors, right? They are transmembrane proteins. They can be on the plasma membrane. They can be in endosomes. They can recognize proteins, nucleic acids, and glycans, usually not self, so foreign or bacterial. And there are all kinds of other receptors as well. Sugar, carbohydrate receptors, nucleotide binding receptors, and then the RIG-I-like receptors, which are sensors of viral RNA in the cytoplasm. So we call these pattern recognition receptors. And they're the first line of the innate system, where they say a protein or an RNA will bind to the toll-like receptor, and things happen to say, we got to mobilize here. So, for example, on the left here, we have some cell surface toll-like receptors. They can recognize proteins from cytomegalovirus or measles or other viruses. Toll-like receptors in the endosome can recognize viral RNA. And when I say recognize, the RNA or protein binds to these TLRs, and they initiate a signaling cascade, which turns on genes in the nucleus that encode interferons. Okay, and there's even a cytoplasmic RNA sensing system, where RNAs that are not viral, that are clearly not viral, are sensed by two different proteins, and they again lead to the synthesis of interferon in the nucleus. So foreign things, proteins, nucleic acids, can be sensed by cells, by toll-like receptors and the like, and when they are sensed, interferon is turned on, interferon synthesis. And these are proteins that are secreted from this particular cell. Now, interferons were first discovered in 1957. I happen to think that it's one of the coolest names for a protein. So two scientists were working with influenza virus, and they noticed that if they took chicken cells in culture and they added non-infectious influenza virus that was, say, heat inactivated, the cells would produce something if they added it to another cell that would protect them against infection. So they called it interferon because it interfered with replication. We now know that interferon is made by virus-infected cells as well as the sentinels. So here we have some viruses binding to epithelial cells. The viruses are getting in. They're sensed by TLRs or something else. The cells make interferon. And then these sentinel cells, which come along to see what's going on, they can pick up apoptotic bodies or proteins or virus particles, and they will make interferons as well. And the interferons will induce an antiviral state. That's the idea. Like I said, I think interferons get rid of most infections before you know it. And one of the reasons is that people that don't make a good interferon response are likely to have more severe disease. So you don't make a good interferon response. Virus replication goes higher than it should. Then the interferon system overreacts. It produces a ton of interferon, which then causes inflammatory problems, like the inflammatory COVID phase. All right, so that's interferons. There are three types, type 1, 2, and 3. Each of them has a receptor on the cell surface. So the interferons here are shown alpha, gamma, lambda, and they bind to a receptor specific for each one. And that binding to the receptor is very important because it starts a signaling pathway in the cell that turns on genes that actually have the antiviral effects. Let me show you. So a virus comes in, it's detected, the cell makes interferon, it secretes it, it binds to interferon receptors on another cell. That cell then makes interferon-stimulated proteins that have the direct antiviral activity. In this case, it's breaking the capsid of this virus. So interferon production is very quick, hours after infection, and then interferon turns on over 1,000 cell proteins. We call these interferon-stimulated genes that encode for the proteins. And we don't know how most of them work. But some of them are very cool, and I want to share their mechanism with you. Here's one called tetherin. So tetherin is a protein stuck on the plasma membrane that holds virus particles onto the cell. So here we have an HIV. It's budding. It's trying to bud and be released from the cell. But the tetherins are holding the particles to each other and to the cell surface, so they can't leave. And here's an electron micrograph of that. Here's an HIV-infected cell, and all the viruses are stuck to the cell surface. So tetherin has the potential to stop virus spread. So you should ask me then, why do we have HIV if tetherin is so powerful? Well, because HIV has an antagonist protein called VPU, which degrades tetherin, and the virus particles are made. For every, what is it that the Merovingians said? Cause and effect. Yes, so that's tetherin, one of the interferon-stimulated genes. There's another one that I really like called IFIT-M3. This inhibits fusion, membrane fusion during virus entry. So you know that viruses with envelopes can fuse their envelopes with the cell, either at the plasma membrane or within endosomes. And this protein, IFIT-M3, is an interferon-induced protein. It blocks fusion. And the reason it does is because it's a really weird-looking protein. So here it is. It has a transmembrane domain, this blue cylinder. But then it has a part that is stuck in the membrane and deforms the membrane. So during fusion, you would normally have, say, virus fusion proteins would be fusing both the outer and inner leaflet, but this blocks that. So fusion can't occur. And you may ask me, well, why do viruses exist if we have this? Well, viruses have antagonists to these proteins. There's always a war. It's always cause and effect. It's always a back and forth. All right, so those are two examples of interferon-stimulated genes. Now, I mean, interferon is great for stopping infection, but it's also dangerous. Just think of it. It induces 1,000 or more proteins, and every cell can do this because most of our cells have interferon receptors. And so when you make interferons in your respiratory tract, say, for a respiratory virus infection, the interferons can diffuse throughout your body, and you can get fever, chills, nausea, malaise. And that's why, because every virus infection makes interferon, pretty much every virus infection will at some point cause what we call flu-like symptoms. Fever, chills, nausea, malaise, etc. Those are caused by interferon, and they're commonly produced in many virus-infected cells. So that's why you have this period in the beginning of an infection where you can't tell what you have. And it's interferon that's doing that. It's not the virus. Now, sentinel cells are another part of the innate immune system. Again, dendritic cells, macrophages, natural killer cells. These cells patrol all of your tissues and looking They're looking for foreign things. Okay, here's a dendritic cell here and an NK attacking another cell. And they play a big role in the bridge between the innate and the adaptive system. So dendritic cells, and they're shown here. So we have virus particles in red and dendritic cells to the stars in different colors because there are different kinds of dendritic cells. They patrol everything: skin, eye, vagina, epithelia, intestine. They're always flowing around looking for stuff. And they will pick up proteins and virus particles and they will bring it into a lymph node and present it to a T cell. And the T cell will say, yeah, this is self, or, this is foreign. We need to react. So the dendritic cell is a member of the innate immune system. It's bridging with the adaptive immune system because the T cell is part of the adaptive immune system. And what happens subsequently we'll consider in another mini lecture. But basically, the making of antibodies and T cells is a result of dendritic cells and sentinels bringing antigens into the lymph node and presenting them to T cells. Here's a great fluorescent image, by the way. It's a section of a lymphocyte. You can see the blood vessels in red, right? The T cells are blue. And this is a dendritic cell in green. Look, folks. It's snuggling up to the T cell. It's presenting it with what it found in its journeys throughout your body. And if it's foreign, the T cell is going to be activated. And boom, we're going to make antibodies and T cells, cytotoxic T lymphocytes. So that's what the sentinels do. Really important. They're always flowing through you, folks. Right now, every one of you, your sentinels are flowing through all of your tissues. Very cool. So what's going to happen is we have cells infected, epithelial cells. The infection is sensed. The cells make interferons. They attract dendritic cells. The dendritic cells become activated. They go into the lymph node where they interact with T cells, as I just told you. And the output is antibodies and cytotoxic T lymphocytes. These dendritic cells are amazing. They were discovered by Ralph Steinman, who got the Nobel Prize for this. So a resting or immature dendritic cell looks like this. They have receptors for everything, and they phagocytose stuff. They can sense viruses and virus proteins. They have toll-like receptors, and they will make interferons in response. They can also take up apoptotic cell bodies, and they're going to present that to the T cells. Now, these cells have MHC class II, which is only found on the sentinels, not on other cells. And what MHC class II does, let's say the DC takes up a virus protein, it will be chopped up and a small peptide shown in orange will be loaded onto the MHC class II. And then as the dendritic cell migrates to the lymph node, it becomes activated, so it has now this star-like shape. But it also has the MHC2 on the surface of the plasma membrane. And it's presenting one of these peptides to a naive T cell in the lymph node. And as I said, if this peptide is foreign, the T cell will become activated. It will then go on and make cytotoxic T lymphocytes and assist in the production of antibodies, which we'll see next time. But that happens only if the innate system is overwhelmed. I think the innate system takes care of most infections. If it can't, then we have production of T cells and B cells. Now, all of this is called inflammation, the production of cytokines and chemokines by sensing. Interferon is a cytokine. This causes inflammation, which is defined as redness, swelling, pain, and heat. These are the four classic signs of inflammation, originally recorded by the Roman encyclopedist Celsius in the 1st century AD as rubor, dolor, calor, and tumor. They're caused by increased blood flow, increased capillary permeability, influx of phagocytic cells, and tissue damage. So why do you need these things? Well, these cytokines, including interferons, increase the blood flow to bring sentinels and other immune cells to the infected area. They increase capillary permeability so that the cells can get to the infected tissue. Phagocytic cells are going to pick up infected cells or pieces of them, and of course tissue damage caused by the response. And this is what inflammation is. And inflammation doesn't have to be caused by virus infection. If you look up inflammation on the internet, this is a figure you'll get. They'll say it's caused by cancer, cardiovascular things, Alzheimer's, pulmonary disease, arthritis, autoimmune diseases, neurological diseases, diabetes, all can lead to inflammation, which involves these 4 signs. Notice missing here is infection. So this picture I got from the internet does not consider infection to induce inflammation, but of course it does, big time, as I've shown you today. So inflammation is good because it encourages the interaction of these sentinel cells, dendritic cells, with the adaptive immune system. And so cytopathic viruses are really good at causing inflammation because they kill cells, and that activates the innate response, and that bridges to the adaptive response. Viruses like adenovirus, herpes virus, and Mpox viruses are cytopathic. They kill cells, and so they induce inflammation. And they induce really good antibody and T cell responses. But there are viruses that do not stimulate inflammation because they don't kill cells. Cells are not damaged, so we don't have any apoptotic bodies produced. We have a low innate response, and as a consequence, a poor adaptive response. And these non-cytopathic viruses typically cause persistent or chronic infections. They're not efficiently cleared because we don't have good inflammation, and so they last the lifetime of the host. That's how a persistent infection begins. So the lesson is this classic inflammatory response, heat, swelling, redness, and pain, really reflects the communication of the innate and adaptive defense systems. If you don't have inflammation or low inflammation, you have an ineffective adaptive response. And this is one reason we put adjuvants in non-infectious vaccines, which can't kill cells. They don't replicate. We use inflammation-stimulating adjuvants to make up for it. And the smallpox vaccine actually benefits from inflammation caused by inoculation. Remember, the smallpox vaccine is delivered in a bifurcated needle. A little drop of vaccine it's put on the needle and then it's scraped into your skin. You actually make cuts. And so you're injuring the skin, and that injury causes inflammation. The cells produce cytokines, immune cells come in to try and repair the damage. And this is actually an important part of smallpox vaccine efficiency. This injury, inflammation-induced injury, actually helps you to get a better immune response against the smallpox vaccine. If you just inject the vaccine, you don't get anywhere near as good an immune response. So a nice illustration of how inflammation is really important for getting a good adaptive immune response, which we'll talk about another time. Okay. And viruses, of course, encode countermeasures for all of these things, intrinsic and innate defenses. Otherwise, they wouldn't be around. They antagonize sensing, interferon production, interferon signal transduction, the production of cytokines and chemokines. They antagonize NK cells, they antagonize dendritic cells, and even complement. Always a cause and effect. Okay, mini lecture on intrinsic and innate defenses. Hope you liked it. Let's see what you guys are doing. Molly said she had 3 deaf aunts from measles and rubella. Oh, I interpreted Visto's comment as something like, "We might have had a much better president today, but he died of measles." Yeah, it was a kid who died who could have been a great president. Right. Got it, Visto. Hello, Margot from Phoenix 95. Oh my gosh, very hot. Very hot. Visto says, I try a hypothetical alternative history about survivor bias. Anyone who says measles is mild is not one who died from it. Very good. Very good. Will there be a vaccine that prevents stupidity? I don't think so. We're stuck with it. Rainey says, as a kid, I had mumps. It wasn't that bad. As it was letting up, it migrated to my brain, and the resulting encephalitis damn near killed me. And Molly reminds us that post-polio syndrome sucks too. It's disabling for some. So you get polio, maybe you get some physical therapy, you can walk again, and then 25, 30, 40 years later, you lose your ability to walk. You lost neurons when you had polio, and now as you age, you're losing more, and you lose the ability to walk. Bad Cat is in Winthrop. Snowed, 32F. Vanity says, I saw today the National Weather Service will not provide translation for non-English speakers. That's just mean, right? Just mean. There's no reason to do this. It's part of the crappy 2025 plan, right? It's disgusting. Will says, one kid in my year was in calipers in the 50s. My Chinese Bill caught polio in the 50s and has been crippled for life. Thank you, Venture, for your support of science communication. Really appreciate it. We need it. Has research been reduced with funding cuts? Yes. Some entire programs have been stopped because they just took the money away. Like COVID, no more COVID. A lot of AIDS has been canceled. A lot of other infectious diseases. Just took it away. The research stops. The people have to be fired, and you can't do the experiments anymore. For sure. And there's no reason to have done that. Yeah, Mike says the AMA is a private professional association. They have no authority to restrict licenses. Right. Right. Oz is supposed to be a very good surgeon. Yeah, it's pretty scary. Okay. I love teaching. Really, I love explaining things. Elizabeth says, from what I can find, Mercola skirted having his license revoked by stopping practicing medicine to focus on his website, which generates a lot of income. He's quite the millionaire. Mike wants to know if RFK could spoil or sabotage vaccines. I don't think so, but he could not get them approved, right, or recommended. He controls the CDC committee that recommends certain vaccines, so he could do a lot of damage. Yeah. Costello says, when I was in school, I was convinced the teachers were only teachers as a power trip. Yeah, I know what you mean. I think I had some teachers like that too. I sensed they weren't really interested in teaching, but I had some who were clearly, and they were great teachers, and they taught me a lot, and they inspired me. And if I taught that back in high school or whatever, I would have been one of them for sure. Thank you, Zhu, for your science contribution to science communication. Please send Amy our regards. I will do that. So we don't, at Microbe TV, we're a nonprofit, and that means your contributions are U.S. federal tax deductible. And we don't have any way of making money except from you, because I made the decision a few years ago we don't take advertising. We used to, but then I thought it was disruptive to learning. So I said, let's do this experiment and see if we can get our listeners to support us. And so far it's worked. So thank you very much. Every one of you who donates, we really appreciate it. Oh, good question from Visto. Do mammals have CRISPR like bacteria? No, we don't have CRISPR systems. That's a nucleic acid-based system. We have protein-based immunity, right? All these intrinsic and innate and adaptive defenses are protein-based. I mean, we do have microRNA, small RNAs that target RNAs and they're degraded, but it's not kept within the cell like CRISPR is in bacteria. Is there any advantage for measles virus when it causes cells to fuse? If so that big fused cell with lots of nuclei, that dies eventually because you can't sustain so many nuclei in one cell. But if cells fuse singly, that can allow the virus to transfer from cell to cell without being exposed to the immune system, right? So BNash op-ed in The Guardian. I didn't see that. Well, I'll look it up. I don't know what their plans are. I haven't spoken to them in a while. F. Yang says, I was talking to someone studying influenza. I learned its NS1 blocks every step of the RIG-I pathway. Yeah, amazing what these multifunctional proteins can do. Can interferon induce apoptosis? I'm not aware of that happening. Let me look it up. Yep. They can. They can induce apoptosis. Could the mini lectures be put all in one place? Yeah, do you think that's useful? Okay, so many of the mini lectures are excerpted from my virology lectures, which are all in one place, but they're shorter. But then there are mini lectures that are not part of my virology course. So yeah, it probably would be useful to excerpt them and put them all in one place. Yeah. Yeah, dendritic cells are pretty cool. They can do amazing things. Frank says, given that some viruses are helpful, some neutral, some harmful, what do you think of the indiscriminate destruction of viruses in a given area by forms of UV light? I don't think you need environmental sources of viruses to, provide the helpful, the beneficial aspects. I think you get those, you know, from other people essentially at different points in your life. When do stats come out to update USA lifespan? Well, I just showed a stat today from 2021, second year of the COVID pandemic, and it was a 1.5 year decline in longevity. I haven't looked, I just found that by searching. So there are certainly more recent ones that you could look up. Yeah, Molly has the scar on her arm, and so do I. Right there. Yep. Margot says it's like the inflammation-induced injury caused by a halo laser. Yes, anything that causes some damage is going to cause inflammation. So when you get a vaccine, you're getting inflammation because you're having an immune response to the vaccine components. And that's good, right? Because remember, inflammation reflects a communication between innate and adaptive immunity. Tona says, regarding the penicillin allergy, I found the study in which you say 500 to 1,000 cases of anaphylaxis is a 2001 study based on a prediction of prevalence. So you're saying it might actually be lower. Zhu says the shingles vaccine reduces the risk for dementia. It's not too far off to predict a vaccine to cure stupidity. Am I wrong? Well, it would have to be an existing vaccine, right? And you would have to assume that stupidity is due in part to some virus getting in your brain, right? Which could be, but there's a genetic component to stupidity too, right? So someone just needs to do the study, right? But I mean, dementia was very clear cut. There was evidence that viral infections were somehow involved, and so the vaccine trial made sense. I don't know if there's any evidence for stupidity. The stupid virus. Does the TB vaccine work in Asia? I don't see why not, but I'm not an expert on TB. Does anyone know? Yeah, it's used widely in Asia as well as globally. It prevents severe disease, but not transmission, so that's not a great vaccine. Oz-Kantaya not big deal. You think they will stop offering vaccines to some immigrants? This is disgusting. It doesn't make any sense. Meanness. Lack of humanity. Doreen says, I'm sure we will be here by next year discussing the polio outbreak. Probably going to have a polio outbreak sometime, yeah. Vaccine coverage is dropping throughout the country. Yes, you should always learn. It's a good way to prevent dementia, in fact, or Alzheimer's, just to use your brain. Exercise, get lots of sleep, and use your brain. Getting lots of sleep at an age is not so easy, but if you think a lot, I think it really makes a big difference. What are we doing on the likes here? Let's take a look. Yeah, it's pretty good. 172, 182. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Yes, Les says he could limit vaccine subsidies and help with distribution, right? Costello will watch some Amoeba Sisters. You know, I interviewed them once for TWIM, I think. Let's see. Was it TWIM? It was at an ASM meeting. Come on, why doesn't it show up early on the search? Well, anyway, you could search for it and find it. It's in my YouTube channel. I interviewed them. It was really, really very nice. They were very charming. Everybody likes the collection of mini lectures, so I'll do that. Yes. DF wants to know, at what point did they see the DC cells in all these interactions? So Ralph Steinman, well, others had also hypothesized that there had to be some intermediate cells that would bring antigens to the lymph node. And he found these dendritic cells that had this weird morphology, and then he studied them a lot, and other people started to study them, and you know, and eventually lots of evidence for their existence was provided. So yes, in part it was theoretical, and also the toll-like receptors. People always thought, in theory, there should be some kind of receptor to recognize foreign from self, and they kept looking, and well, they found them. Yeah. Your smallpox scars behind your knee? That's very interesting. Yeah, I could see where you might not want to have it on your shoulder. Yeah. There you go, Dagfin. Science and education is a vaccine against stupidity. There you go. I think that's beautiful. Yeah, Steve, you're right. Ay, ay, ay. When I see something that's just ridiculous, right? Yeah. Yeah, the tuberculosis vaccine is BCG. Bacille calmette-guerin. Yes, so MN takes the TWIV vaccine twice a week. All right, so Tona, why don't you send Daniel an email asking Daniel at microbe.tv, asking him, is the penicillin allergy? What is the penicillin allergy rate? Because you think 500 is too much. Yeah. Okay. Can you do that? Because I'll forget. The hamster in my head, Elizabeth, runs on this little wheel constantly. Does that count as thinking? No, it doesn't. You have to thinking means you have to take information and process it and come up with ideas and things like that. Yeah. Larry from San Jose, you're doing a great job helping to preserve science. Thank you so much. I try. One of the worst parts is no matter how much information you send their way, they just turn around and say sources. Yeah, they're just obnoxious. Very obnoxious. Interesting that smallpox vaccine seems to protect against Mpox. Yeah, so when smallpox vaccination was stopped in the general population, that's when the incidence of Mpox started to rise, especially in some African countries where the rodent vector was present, right? It started to go up. Yeah. Artemis says, thinking aloud is not a guaranteed way to prevent dementia. Well, look, a neurologist at NIH who I know said for Alzheimer's, a very good way to prevent Alzheimer's is to think. It's different from dementia, right? Thank you for being a streamer in the 21st. Who knew I would stream? I had no idea, but it seemed like a good idea, right? I think Visto said something cool. Natural killer cells. I imagine them as badass cops with a big gun who sometimes break the rules. K cells are pretty cool, yeah. All right, folks. I think it's time to wrap up. It's 9:56. Stella wants to get cells at work. Yeah, I have a few of those volumes right here. And at least one of my virology books. I can give you an older edition if you want. Okay, folks. It's been a pleasure. It's been a slice. I want to thank our moderators for being here. Vanity Nutrition, Steph SF, Tom Steinberg, Les Fabi, Vanity Nutrition. Thank you all for being here. And it's kind of quiet tonight, right? Not so bad. And everybody else, almost 200 of you. Yeah, Costello, send me your address. Vincent at microbe.tv. Email. Send me your address and I'll send you an older, the fourth edition, which is just before the one we have. I'll even autograph it for you. Okay. Thanks, everybody, for coming. I really appreciate you folks coming week in and week out and bringing your nice questions. Our next office hours will be on next Wednesday. That's going to be the 16th of April, 2025. Make sure you come back with your questions. You always have a lot of good questions. Next week we'll do adaptive immunity, okay? All right, folks. As always, you better be careful. You better be safe. Until next week, bye-bye.